Hello everyone, welcome back to another card tutorial. Today I have this really cute, fun and bright interactive card to share with you. For today's card, I'm using the Lawn Fawn slimline dies, just the big stitched one. I'm also using the Tropical Toucans stamp set by Pretty Pink Posh. Another Pretty Pink Posh product I'm using today is the stitched Leafy borders, and I'm also using the Lawn Fawn Swish and Pop pull tab for my interactive piece. So here I am getting started on the interactive part of this card. I'm lining up where I need the holes for my swish and pop piece, and I'm going to cut that out with my die cut machine. I've also got some little pieces of white cardstock that I'm going to double up so that this piece that you're pulling is nice and thick and sturdy. I feel that if these things are going to constantly be used and moving, I want them to be sturdy and last as long as they can. Today I'm also using a piece of acetate. I'm not using shrink plastic like I have in my previous cards, and I'm using a couple of silver brads. And then it was just a matter of playing around with where I thought this interactive piece was going to be and where I wanted my sentiment to be revealed. And you'll see me play with this about 10,000 times because I love this interactive set. I feel like it is so much fun. With my Stitch Leafy borders, I cut out a bunch of light green cardstock. And then with some dark green cardstock, I'm going to start mapping out where I need to hide my interactive piece. And then on the opposite side, the right side of this card, I want that to be the same thickness. I'm going to be, I guess, hiding the back of that side too. That doesn't really make sense. What I'm trying to do is make a frame that is even on both sides so that it doesn't even look like it's hiding an element. From my Tropical Toucan set, I'm stamping the branches and the three adorable birds. This is the first time I've used this set. I grabbed it because my son loves toucans. And if I'm buying something, I need to come up with a way to use it so that it is not taking up precious space in my tiny house. I've got to make the most out of all of these things. So I decided that this was the set I was going to use. It's adorable. I just wanted to put it to work. So here I am doing a little bit of colouring with my Copics. I think I use a couple of alcohol markers too, but it's mostly Copics today. I'll leave you with some music while I finish this off. So as you can see here, I've just cut out the middle of this piece of cardstock so that it is a frame, and I'm going to be framing that frame with a bunch of these leaves. I love this bright green cardstock, but it's just flat. Just like all cardstock, there's not a lot of dimension to it, so I'm adding some dark green around the edges of these leaves, just so that it kind of brings out that texture in the cardstock. It gives it a bit of a shadowy look. It just changes it up completely. While these stitch leaves fit really well above and below that hollow bit that I cut out of the cardstock, I also needed a few for the sides. And what I really loved about this die set was that I found you could kind of cut all of these leaves up and you can use all of them individually. The die is designed really well so that you can kind of hide the cuts where you've separated the leaves. So if you wanted to, you could use a whole line of leaves, or if not, you could chop them up and use them individually. And that's what I've done here. So a bunch of these leaves are going to be on either side of the frame. One side to cover up the big piece that's hiding the moving mechanisms, and the other side is purely for decoration and to match. I'm also going to be using a few of these leaves on my interactive piece so that it can hide the sentiment. I'm also going to give them a little bit of dark green ink as well, just so that they match. Now, would it be one of my cards if I wasn't flicking ink and watercolor pigments everywhere? So I'm using the same ink that I used to darken up the edges of these leaves, and I'm going to be popping a little bit of that on my mat, watering it down, and then sprinkling it over the top. And while it looks quite dark on my mat, I found it dries very light. It's just something about these oxide inks that do that. And then I'm going in with some yellow gold watercolor pigment and sprinkling that over the top too. I felt that the gold and the green worked really well together. It was nice and bright, and I felt like it just kind of went with the whole tropical feel. Now back to my interactive element while all that other stuff is drying. I put it in its, position it's meant to be sitting in, and I'm going to be marking out where the cardstock is going to be cut to have access to the pull tab. And there we have it. And while it's in that proper position, I'm going to trim off the excess. I'm also going to stick the little bit over the pull tab with the arrow so that it shows the recipient where they need to pull for the piece to work. I'm finding with this die set that it's good to have a lot of space for the pieces to move around where they're not going to get bumped or squished, and so that nothing interferes with its movement. So I'm using some kids adhesive craft foam again, like I have the last few times, and I'm doubling it up. This gives you heaps of room to work with. I'm just going to map out the basic places for now. Bits where I know it's not going to bump, and on the opposite side too where there's no moving pieces. And I'll get back to the other bits soon. Now at this point I won't show it, but I did a big whoopsie with my background. I totally messed it up where I had positioned the sentiment and stamped it. So things might look a little bit funny, like my pull tab looks a bit bigger again, even though I'd already trimmed it. But that's just because I went back and fixed some things. So what you're going to see is the right way to do it, not the way where I ruined it. So what I'm showing here is I'm lining up where my leaves are going to go so that I know how high to put my sentiment, because the way I had stamped it incorrectly, I had put it too low and it was half hiding behind the leaves and it just wasn't going to work. It was also off center. I think I was just a little bit excited and wanted to hurry up and stamp things, and I wasn't really paying attention to where I was stamping it. So this is the one that turned out perfectly. It's pretty much centered. I'm lucky that the swinging piece of the pull tab can reach the center of this card just fine. And here we go. I'm going to add my leafy border, and it fits beautifully over my sentiment. I'm going to also add it to the top. And it turned out perfectly this time. I was going to leave in the other footage, but it would just take too long to show you something that didn't work. I found it easier to stick my leaves on this way because I wanted to make sure all of my double-sided foam pieces were being stuck down properly. And here I am just measuring up some more of that craft foam. So it was pretty easy to stick a long piece of craft foam at the bottom because I didn't have anything that needed to slip behind there, but the top was a bit different because this is only the third card I've made with this Swish and Pop interactive piece, and I've used it in some funky ways so far. And today the piece that I'm swishing needs to lift up behind my frame at the top, otherwise it'll just bump into the frame and it won't reveal the sentiment. So here I am just having a play with how much space I need for the acetate piece to move around. I did stick a little bit of foam down here, and I ended up actually ripping this bit off because it really did just interfere a bit too much. In fact, there's a couple of bits that I have to move around a bit later because things were a bit squishy back here. So here I am just sticking down the pieces that I was confident at the time would work. To work out if I could cover my sentiment and everything was working, I just used some of my tape runner that is kind of that semi-permanent until it has time to set, so that I could work with the pieces and move them around if I needed to. Because I have, like I said, I haven't made anything quite like this before. I just wanted to make sure everything was lining up nicely. So as you can see, I'm using a bunch of those leaves that I had cut up before, and they're going to cover my sentiment until you pull on the pull tab where it will reveal it. To adhere them permanently, I use a bit of PVA glue a bit later. And as you can see, when I pull on that, the leaves pop up behind the frame. Using some double-sided tape on my craft foam, I removed all the backing and began sticking this frame into place. I did just have to remove a tiny piece of that foam that was getting in the way of things moving, and once I had done that, the interactive piece worked perfectly. So it was time to start decorating the front. I began by sticking down the branches. I then adhered the remaining leaves on both sides, kind of around the branches to cover up where it doesn't join to a tree, just so that it blends the whole thing in a little bit better. And then I added my toucans. The background just needed a little bit more colour, so I used the tiny flower stamp in the tropical toucan set that matched the flowers on the branches, and then adhered them all over the place. I think they worked perfectly. At this point, I then added my double-sided tape to the back of this whole piece, as it was time to stick everything onto my card base. After removing the backing and adhering this onto my card base, this card was complete. I would love to know what you think of it in the comments. I think it turned out really nice. I love these stamps, I love these dies. This interactive element was so much fun to create. I've never quite made a card like this before. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you can come back and see what I make next. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.